Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. That's Rob, I'm Brian. Today was the Austrian GP. And Rob, I thought it was a hell of a weekend, man. What did you think?
Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Apart from one little thing that I'll decide when I get on my rant soapbox. I won't start with a rant, let's ease our way in, enjoy ourselves. But, fair warning to everybody, there is definitely a Rob's rant
Oh,
coming.
God.
If you listen
Oh,
before, you
boy.
can probably guess the topic. But
Oh, jeez.
anyhow, I was about to jump into outlining the episode, but I've seen you've put a rather strange note at the beginning, Brian. Do I do the normal intro or do you want to cover that first? Because I have
Well,
no idea what that
I,
means.
I watched. I watched the last Grand Tour special finally. Have you seen it yet, Rob?
No, not yet. It's down on our
Okay.
probably maybe this evening's viewing, maybe.
Well, I won't give any spoilers out for anyone who hasn't seen it, but at the very beginning in the top left corner where they put, the warnings, normally it's excessive violence or sexual situations. And I'm not saying for Grand Tour, but for, other shows, salty language or whatever the American version would be. This said alcohol use. And I'm thinking to myself, about 95% of our podcasts would need that in the top left corner as we started off each episode. But we're doing this as we like to call it sort of the quick shot right after the race. So it's early in the day in the States. So I haven't had any beverages yet today. I don't know. I can't speak for Rob. But
I was down the iron horse, so that I may have indulged in a couple of beers.
okay,
So
so then it is appropriate. Alcohol
it
use
is.
warning.
It is. So on that note, on the alcohol warning, today's show, sponsored by alcohol, will feature very quick news and social because we've got a lot to unpack. Because we've got a sprint weekend, which, despite the fact that Brian hates the format, he's going to eat big spoonfuls of humble pie because I think he loved it. It's not to say that we're going to hear him go back on his opinion that he likes the format, but I think even the biggest haters of the sprint weekend would probably admit that we got a very good sprint race yesterday.
Yes.
And today we got a good race as well. Not rain interrupted, but still gave us some cracking racing. So we're going to do news and social weekend roundup of everything that we saw, quali, sprint, race, and then we've got Silverstone preview because we're back to back and we're going to one of my
Yes.
favourite tracks.
This is so great. This is
We're
so
recording
great.
so quick that I imagine that the supercomputer at F1 has only just finished calculating time penalties and hasn't even moved across to working out fantasy points yet. So
Nope,
we probably
still
won't get to that.
calculating. Still calculating.
Still calculating. So yeah, let's jump straight into the news. And the big one this week is Ryan Reynolds. Not content with owning Wrexham Football Club, has now decided to spread into new sports, and he's 24% owner in Alpine. Kind of. That was obviously the big headline everybody wanted to go with. Ryan Reynolds buys Alpine. It's like, well, it is, but it's through his maximum effort company, I believe, and it's not even just them. So it's Ryan Reynolds, Rob.
McElhenney? Sure.
Yep. Michael B. Jordan, Otro Capital, Redbird Capital, who are the third largest stakeholders in the Fenway Sports Group for Boston Red Sox and Liverpool FC. So all of these guys have all come together and have bought 24% of Alpine. But why ruin a good headline and just say Ryan Reynolds has bought Alpine?
So I have a question for you. I'm excited by this. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about the valuation and excitement around F1. This isn't that much of a surprise. We've seen celebrity investors in all kinds of things, from sports to even insurance, our industry, which we've seen a lot of. But I guess the question I have for you, and this is the Chris Pratt meme. Everyone's talking about it, and I don't know what it means, and it's too late to ask. I've seen this Wrexham thing everywhere. I have no effing clue what that is. It's a real football club, real soccer team, and they made a show about it? Like, I don't understand. I have no idea. Or is it a Ted
Uh,
Lasso situation? I don't know, and I'm afraid to
okay.
ask.
Oh my
But I'm
gosh,
asking.
we haven't got enough time. But let's just imagine, right? You like the Packers, right? So let's imagine that the NFL wasn't a closed shop and there were, let's say, four professional divisions. So you had the NFL right up at the top, then three more divisions below it, yeah?
Sure.
And you had the ability to move through them. It wasn't a closed franchise where no matter how bad you are, you don't get to fall out of the bottom. So true promotion and relegation. So imagine those four tiers existed. Well, you still wouldn't find Wrexham in the English football division because they had fallen outside what's known as the professional. The top four leagues are kind of like the professional football league, and they were wallowing down in a league below that. And Reynolds and McKenna came in. and pumped a whole bunch of cash into it. They've been brilliant to the local town community, got Wrexham back on their feet, invested in the stadium, invested in players, and they got promoted back up into the big league this year. Kind of
Oh,
Hollywood moment for the cameras for the documentary that they're doing.
huh.
And they're now back into that fourth rung now. So, four more straight or three more straight promotions, and they'll be up in the big time. So that's what they've
Okay.
done. And they've done it in a really good, they haven't, they're getting a lot of kudos for the way they've done it. So there's a lot of genuine excitement for people thinking, especially Alpine fans looking at this and going, well, if he comes in with his magic wand the same way that they approached the kind of way that they didn't just come in, pump money, take selfies and go, aren't I great being a celebrity owning a football club? They actually did it properly. So I don't know how much influence they're going to have here. They got 24%. It'd be interesting to see what this does for Alpine.
Yeah, it puts them at a pretty high valuation, 900
It
some odd
does.
million pounds, dollars, whatever. But speaking of valuations and teams, we're watching the 2026 grid, and we've always talked a lot about Andretti, right? We've talked about the idea that Andretti wants to get in, but now we're seeing that there are other teams that want to join as well. This week we had the whole conversation around High Tech Global Holdings Limited, which sold 25% to a Kazakh businessman who is not Borat. And then it turns out, so that's the second team, LKY Sons, Lucky Sons, I don't know. And I don't know any of these people, Formula Equal, all confirmed their plans to try and enter F1 in 2026. Rob, tell me what any of this means, man.
Yeah. I don't know because I mean, if all of these get the investment and they can stump up the money for the what's it called, the anti-dilution fee or whatever it is, the 200 million that they've all got to put on the table before they're even allowed to play nicely. If let's imagine they can all do that, I think we've kind of heard that despite the fact that there used to be more cars on the grid, just the size of the cars, size of everything at the moment, there's a lot of pushback as to whether the pit lane could really support extra teams. So I don't know. Are we staring down the barrel of an 11th and 12th constructor coming along in 2026? Or are we looking at someone has to be, like the nightclub bouncer? It's one out, one in at the moment. You've got to wait for someone to leave before you can take their spot. Don't know. I'd like to see it expand. I'd like to see kind of 12 constructors in there. I think they could do it. And
I
maybe. Sorry to cut you off, but maybe that becomes the tipping point of with all these tracks that are all bidding to try to host things. Maybe the ones that can get their act together and expand facilities as needed would be the ones that can take their spots by accommodating more teams.
Well, I've said it before, and for anybody new to the pod, I'll say it again. Don't discount the Andretti entry. They will have money. I've explained to you how I know this. It ain't going to be a money problem. Mark Walter and the people backing that bid and other people I know very well who are trying to get involved, I promise there's money in the bid for Andretti. The question will be, will the other teams accept him in the kind of way they've worked in the U.S.? Not saying it's bad, but it's a little bit, I don't know, blue collar for the F1 approach. So it'll be interesting to see if they're accepted as well. Anyhow, speaking of teams, last team news I have, AlphaTauri. I read this briefly this week, and it may have been in a haze of not sleeping much, but I'm pretty sure I saw a rumor that they're not going to be named AlphaTauri next season. Did you see that too, or was I making
Yeah,
that
yeah.
up?
No,
Okay.
you weren't falling asleep. Helmut Marko basically said, yeah, they won't be called that next year, which to me was like a bit of a nothing burger. It just means
Exactly.
the clothes brand isn't really working out, so it's going to have a different name next year. Okay, next.
May I suggest Dirty Siders? I'm willing to pony up $10 today.
Oh man. And two little Lewis snippets. One which was just a bad joke made by me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Lewis was seen backstage at Elton John's Glastonbury set, and I don't know why Lewis was there because I thought Max was the Rocket Man.
You actually had a good joke this week, and I don't know if you stole it, but when Ryan Reynolds was in the thing, could they call it the Deadpool position?
That was mine. That was all
That was
me.
good. That was good.
And I was
Kudos to
giggling
you.
to myself as I made the Deadpool, but instead of the swords in his back, the two checkered flags. So Deadpool, yeah, definitely. Um, Then we had a little bit of a nothing burger moment that the press really tried to make a big thing of, which is the bit of Formula One or any sport that I don't like when the media are up to their little dirty tricks. So, interviewed Lewis about the current season. He made a remark about how dominance isn't good for a sport. He actually went and covered the whole thing. He said, "Look, I've grown up with dominance. There were dominance of Ferraris, McLaren. I experienced a whole period of dominance, and now Max is enjoying it as well. But long term, I don't think it's good for the sport." there is nothing wrong with that statement as far as I'm concerned. It's
Agreed. Agreed.
fact-based,
Yeah.
right? We've
Yeah.
had dominance. We've all had dominance. He didn't make out that he hadn't benefited from it. He clearly said that he'd enjoyed a spell of dominance, and Max has got one, and just said that maybe the FIA needs to look at ways that they can change this so that teams can't dominate like that. Okay, fine. Of course, every single news article that comes out after that only focuses on the FIA need to stop Red Bull dominating. Lewis is throwing his rattle out the pram again. They then take that snippet when they interview Max. They don't give him the context of everything that Lewis said. They just said, "Hey, Max, Lewis thinks that the FIA should stop you dominating. What do you reckon?" And he's like, "Well, life's not fair." And they're like, "Oh, Max retorts to Lewis that it's like, oh my God, you've totally invented something that didn't exist. It drives me nuts." I'm not going to waste any more breath on it, actually.
Well, good for you. This week also, I was texting with an old friend I hadn't talked to for a while, and just seeing how she was doing, and she was asking what I was up to, and we traded some notes, and she said, "Oh, by the way, I listened to the podcast." I said, "What? How do you know I have a podcast? And how do you find out about it?" And she told me a mutual friend told her about it, and she's really enjoyed F1, her and her husband, since watching Drive to Survive, which I also have enjoyed. And so, Cindy, if you're listening, shout out. We got to get you on the 100 seconds of DRS. And we actually have a couple people who have volunteered for 100 seconds, but I've been sort of back-to-back trips for the last month. But now I'm done. Back to the real world. We'll make those happen. We'll have a 100 seconds guest next week. So, and it might be Cindy, it may not be, but Cindy, join us for that at some point. So that's enough news. Let's talk a little bit about videos. I only have two. I've gotten some feedback that I've focused too much on the Hilton channel, on the Marriott Bonvoy channel, on the Gulf Oil channel. What about the big boys? What about the Red Bulls? And so we had two videos that I enjoyed. One of them, 1.3 million views over the last few days. It's F1 drivers race huge mega trucks. And then they had to tell us who it was. It was Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda. Thanks, the F1 fans knew that already. Because it's on the Red Bull channel, not the F1. It's on the sort of action sports, beverage drink thing. It was nearly 6 minutes. I loved it. I loved watching Max and Yuki in the big, what I would call Bigfoot monster truck type situation going around this quarry. It was awesome. Did you see this one, Rob? It was pretty popular.
It was brilliant. Loved it. Absolutely brilliant, this one. I won't give away who wins because you've got to watch to find out.
You got to watch to find out. The second one, Daniel Ricciardo did a trick shot challenge in Canada. They recorded it in the paddock, so I was very familiar with where they were and what they were doing, because, Rob and I ended up in the paddock. Thanks, Paul, you're a legend. But this was on the Red Bull F1 channel. It was all right. It was just over 4 minutes, but Tale of Two Cities, this guy had 74,000 views as of today. It's been out 5 days. I mean, we get more plays than that on a pod. So they had snowboarder Mark McMorris and professional ice hockey player Mitch Marner, two people I don't know, and Daniel doing slap shots, basically. And the best part of it is when Checo walks out of the hospitality and gets sucked into the whole thing at the end. That's all I'm going to say. If you're going to watch any of it, at least watch that part. Otherwise, if you skip it, that's fine. And then Rob and I would like to give a special shout out and kudos to listener Andy. He's amazing. We talk about him in the fantasy. He's on the Discord. Andy is the man. He was able to find our profile back shot, and Rob turned around for a minute. You saw the side of my face.
You do as well.
Yeah, barely.
In fact, let's not spoil it. I've found out a way now that I'm going to put this on our YouTube, and I'm going to freeze frame and zoom in on our moment on TV.
So Andy, thank you.
We'll add it to the video vault. I'll put it on YouTube. I'll add it in the show notes as one of the video vault items. Okay. Yeah. Do you want horror? Do you want scary horror music to zoom in on our faces, or something a bit more? Light
it is our 1.5 seconds of fame. Andy, thanks, brother.
Yeah, and nobody's been able to find the Jensen Button interview. He must have been being interviewed for the Hilton Bonvoy channel or something, and maybe you'll find it one day, Brian. But
Hilton Bonvoy, that's a good mix.
We video bombed that so well that I'm so disappointed that video doesn't exist. But
I was popping my T-shirt. I turned around, and I'm popping the T-shirt that says Dirty Side. I mean, the only way it couldn't have been any better is if I turned around and showed them my Dirty Side tramp stamp. But I didn't, and it didn't make it, so I guess that's why.
Right, moving on. Okay. Race week. Practice is where I'm going to start. I was trying to work out what the hell I was going to say then, but practice. And there wasn't much of it. Free practice one on a sprint weekend. That's all we get. And I do like this. I like the fact, and I know you don't, because I think you said before you like them to learn the track more and learn the layout and time to prepare the right setup and tires and something else about tires and whatever. But I like the fact you've almost got this huge mishmash of what everybody's trying to do. You've got kind of some people going out. We had Williams going out with the Floviz on there because they're still trying to work out setup things. You've got other people bombing it around to try and do almost quali laps. Other people doing tire runs, heavier runs. So you've just got like kind of everything going on all in one crazy session. So actually quite enjoyed free practice one. Normally that's the one that I would probably tune out of, or maybe miss altogether because I'm waiting for you to turn up from the airport. It's kind of like that kind of one that I don't really worry about too much. Did you get to see any of practice, Brian?
Negative. And
No, I
then
didn't think so.
then we went to quali, which was 10 a.m. here on Friday, and I had a wicked day at work on Friday, so I didn't even get to watch quali till Saturday because then I had social things right after work, and it was a great time, and I'm not complaining. But so practice didn't make my roster. I'd play the Iverson quote, but it's too long. So moving on. Then we got into.
I've got to stop you before we
Yeah.
get into quali, okay?
Yeah.
Because we've got to do our public service announcement first.
Yes. Well, this is what I was about to say, but go for it.
Okay. You go for it. You take it away, Brian.
Well, track limits. What this did the FIA wake up and say, you know what, we're going to be the toughest police on track limits ever, and we're not going to warn anybody because all the teams seem to have been caught by surprise by this. I don't understand what happened. Like it was
They all
track
got
limits
briefed.
situation. Did
Yeah,
they not
it's-
believe what they heard? It was
Yeah,
everywhere.
this is. Let's get this one out of the way. I mean, we obviously have to talk about it during the race because it played a part there. But I'm like, be interesting to see if Paul says anything in his review. If we get a review today, we're coming on air so soon after the race.
We have it.
that
We have it.
haven't even seen that if he sent anything or if he will send anything.
I just
hope he will.
downloaded it. It's hot off the press.
Oh, excellent. So, to me, these are the 20 top level drivers allegedly on the planet, right? Because Formula One, they always say, is the pinnacle. And everywhere else, other people of other motorsport fans can dispute that all they like. But let's just go with that for the minute. They get told at the beginning, there's an FIA briefing that says that we're going to be tough on track limits here. You have to stay inside the white lines. Basically, imagine the white line is a wall and don't smash into the wall. So they all get told. And yet we had, over the course of qualifying, I saw the output at the end, 47 deleted laps because they can't stay inside the white line. Now, I've said this before. Me being the highly skilled Formula One driver that I am can sit here and criticize this, but it's the edge of the track. They're told not to go over it. So here's an idea. Don't go over it. I mean, now last year there was a bit of criticism because the FIA seemed to be, all the stewards seemed to be a little bit hit and miss as to whether
Right.
or not they were going to give things out or not.
Correct.
So this year they went, right, put the feedback on board from last year. This time, every single one is going to get done. You're going to get your warnings, you're going to get your black and white flags in the race, and then you're going to get penalties. That's it. End of, guys. So just stay inside the white line.
Yeah. I that's my point. Like they obviously had a policing strategy, and what I don't understand is, okay, after quali, maybe the teams would have picked up on this, that it was serious. They still didn't. I mean, it was still happening into the race. But here's the thing: the counterpoint I'd make. They're going 160 miles an hour around corners where they're trying to hit the apex of the turn, trying to gain as much time or lose as little time, I guess, by changing the direction of the car, using all of the track. There are milliseconds, tenths of seconds even, to be had by going wide. So getting it to that exact point where your inside tires are on the line but not showing the line is their job. And
Yeah.
and
So
by
do it better.
come on.
If it's in Baku, they've got a physical barrier. They've got the wall. They've still
Yeah.
got track limits, but they've got the wall.
I understand.
So I just
If
don't
it's
understand.
Jeddah, it's the same thing. And on some of the
Yeah,
turns
it's-
at Austria, they'd put gravel. So if you'd gone off, you'd have been in the gravel. I get it. I don't think it was.
I much prefer.
Yeah.
I much prefer this year's complete policing of it. Last year was too random, where they kind of
Fine.
felt like they rolled a dice to decide if they were going to
I
give
do
the.
too. I thought it was better to have
so-
complete policing, but I would have liked the teams to have done a better job talking to the drivers about it in advance and worrying about it instead of, people like Lando started the hall monitor and then Lewis was talking about it the whole rest of the race. So Toto had to come on and tell him to just drive the damn car. But we'll get back to that. So quali, Rob, take us into quali, buddy.
Yeah. So quali, it was kind of interesting to see that it's somebody. Apologies, it might have been Lizzie. I can't remember who tweeted me to say about the Williams cars. Like, has Sargent actually got the upgrades this race? Because Q1, Sargent was so far away from Albon that you just hoped that Sargent hadn't got the upgrades yet. But no, they all had the upgrade package this weekend. So Sargent really didn't do too well Q1. But The other person that was out there to try to, as he quote that he'd said before the weekend was, "I want to show Helmut Marko what I'm made of out on track where it counts," was Nick De Vries, and yeah,
20th.
yeah,
20th.
not
Yeah.
good, not good. So Sargent didn't make it through. Nick De Vries didn't make it through. Zhou Yuki K-Mag didn't make it through either. We got into Q2. We had good lap times being deleted again. Both the Red Bulls fell foul of it. Perez just didn't seem to understand what the white line
I
was.
don't. Then
It just didn't seem.
They send him out again and they go, "Hey, we really need this one. We don't have a time. We need basically just get us a banker." At this point, he goes, "Yeah, no problem. Deleted."
Deleted.
At this point, he was when they. I have a picture. It was so funny. At the end of Q2, when they showed the times, Checo is 61 seconds off the lead because all he had was when he was trundling around, getting ready to run it. That was the only lap that counted. It took him twice as long.
And
How does that happen? How does that happen?
I don't know. That Red Bull surely is fast enough that even if he just like trundles at sort of like 3/4 pace for them, it should have been enough to get through to Q3. But no, he couldn't do it. So we lost Perez, we lost Valtteri, Piastri, Ocon, and George. George dropped out. And then finally, it kind of settled. The dust sort of settled, and I don't know whether team principals went around and just took helmets off drivers, punched them in the face, and then put the helmet back on again and went, "Stay inside the white line." But I don't think we got many, if any, track limit in Q3. Everybody seemed to understand. Oh, you mean the white line? Oh, stay inside it. Oh, got you. So we had a pretty good Q3.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
Max, I thought, was going to hang up his gloves and helmet because he'd put a stonking lap in. It didn't look like he was getting ready to go back out again. Then he suddenly decided to go out. And man, is he squeezing everything out of that car because Charles was on an absolute flyer. And Charles would have taken pole if Max hadn't come back out again. But Max was ahead of him, I think, and had done what he does and improved his time. And Charles came around and was, what was it, 0.04?
Yeah, 0.048.
Oh,
so
man.
close.
I mean, I was happy for Charles to get second, but that's just like nothing. That's not even the blink of an eye, is it?
No, it isn't. And you know what? We've bagged on Charles a bunch, calling him the new Mr. Saturday. And even though this was Friday, he still delivered. He had a bad Saturday, and I was about to make some comments, and then I really enjoyed what he put together in the race and what he did. We'll get there. You may not have, but I did. And so I thought it was kind of interesting, right? I loved Albon made it to Q3. I love that we had Nico Hulkenberg and the Gas Man in Q3. I thought it was fun. I mean, I obviously missed Checo and George and everybody we talked about. But for me, the beginnings of a thing I'd like to invent, at least for today's episode, Driver of the Weekend, DOT we.
No.
Yes.
No, seriously. So don't ask me why.
Yeah.
I don't know how I ended up back in our old WhatsApp messages from when we were first starting this pod, but I did, right?
Yeah.
An idea you had that we should do before we'd even recorded a first show.
I'm sure it was good.
No, it is. And maybe we do it, right? So instead of driver of the day or whatever, the weekend or whatever you call it, we should do King of the Pits versus just the Pits. So who was...
I did.
So who was our almost like our driver of the day, I guess, the king of the pits, and who was just the pit?
You're telling me you have enough time to go back in a year and a half of WhatsApps, but good on you. So Dotwe is not as good as King of the Pits. I mean, Lando. Let's talk about Lando for a second, can we? I know he had the upgrades and Oscar did not. I get that. I don't care what he had on that car. The car's been so bad the whole season. Lando put that thing in quali 6th in Q1, 3rd in Q2, and 4th in Q3. He started on the second row. 6, 3, 4. Those are your winning lottery numbers for King of the Pits starting Friday, Lando Norris. That was tremendous. And there were a couple stats. These aren't quite worthy of the SAP Stats Lap House, but we're going to use, because they're a little bit about Checo, we use the SAP Stats Austrian edition for Friday, quali. So Max took his 4th pole in a row here at Austria, but also overall this season. Checo, it was the 4th time in the Red Bull not going into Q3. That is horrendous. And I know he came back in the race, and we'll talk about it. People had him in the top 3 for driver of the day. I thought that was disgusting because it was, I guess, of the day. But if of the weekend, he didn't deserve it. 4th time, and I love Checo. I mean, I'm a Checo fan, so it's cutting close to my heart here. The last time a Red Bull hadn't made it into Q3 three in a row was David Coulthard in 2008, I think. I heard the stat on TV. I tried to write it down as fast as I could. So to me, you had just these ups and downs. Checo the down, Lando the up. I loved seeing Albano, Gasman, and Hulk in Q3. This was, for me, the beginning of a really good weekend. Quali was great, and I'm like, this is gonna be exciting. And I thought it paid out. Yeah.
Come on, I sent you that stat on WhatsApp. I thought you were going to thread that into your.
Well, I got to do your work too. Well. Do you have it handy?
To you, because you're the stat man. It's SAP stats. It's not Vale stats.
Pull it up on your phone.
I'm going to do it then. So, apparently Q1 was the first time in F1 history, not like this season or last season or this decade or hybrid era, but F1 history, that all of Q1 has been split by less than a second. So
that's so cool.
Max Verstappen down to Nick de Vries, despite the fact he trundled around in 20th. It was 0.858 seconds across the entire field. So we talk about the field kind of grouping together. We've talked about how there's not really kind of Red Bull aside. We've got a nice little gaggle of cars at best in the rest, and then we don't really have a sort of a second and third, third and fourth tier after that. Everything does seem to be converging, which is cool, and long may it continue. So yeah, there we go. That's my little stat. So then we wake up for sprint weekend. Sprint shootout. Had to get up at stupid o'clock to watch the qualifying, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed. But as soon as I kind of woke up and I saw the weather that was going to be at play, it kind of always looks like you're going to get some fun out there. Let's put it that way. But did you this was part of your marathon of catching up then, right, Brian?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I had to basically. It would have been at 5 a.m. I would have had to get up to watch this live. I would have had to get up at 4 to watch quali first, and that ain't gonna happen. I was out late Friday night with some friends. I had no voice left by the time I walked in at some god awful hour Saturday morning. I'm like, I'm just gonna watch these things on delay, and I did. And man, I know I don't like sprints and the sprint weekends. I have an analogy for it. It's a bad one. It's like the person in your town, and in this case, I'll use a woman who you see at events. She's got kids similar age as your kids, whatever, and she's just a bad person. And you're like, no thanks. You try to avoid them as much as you can. She's not a nice person. But then occasionally she shows up to an event, and you're like, yeah, she's pretty cute. And that's what this week. That's what this weekend was.
Where on earth you were meandering with this? I'm like, what the hell? This is kind of like.
That's what this weekend was for me.
Analogy overboard.
Showed up looking good, but still.
Anyway, we'll get away from you and your random women that you obviously stalk in your town, and let's talk about the fact that we woke up and there it was, a drying track. It had been raining, and we kind of still had some drizzle going on, but it was inters to start with. And almost straight out of the gate, Sainz has. Well, they said it was a brake-by-wire problem, but it was obviously mechanical as well, because it was I don't really understand the technicalities of it, but whatever the brake-by-wire system did led to massive overheating in the actual mechanical brakes. He came into the pits and there was just like smoke everywhere.
It was broken by wire is what it was at that point. It was bad. And when Crofty towards the end of shootout, SQ, whatever we're doing this one, was like, I don't think he's going to get back out in time. And then he did. I know I'm going ahead a little bit, but I can't hold back. When he put in that lap and the team's telling him how to do, he's like, no, I got to prepare myself. And he was
all over the place. I told you when you wrote your own notes, you were going to take us all out of order.
I loved
you jumping ahead.
I'm still at SQ1.
Yeah, I know, but you've just jumped to the end, to the punchline. So the track was dry and there was a drying line coming on. We had everybody jumping in and piling on to softs. And then I love it because you get this grid order that was kind of there, and you're looking at it and going, okay, who's where? And then suddenly, like, I don't know, Albon or even Sargent will go and like chuck it at number 1 or something stupid because they're on softs and it's making a mockery of the board that's there. And once everyone's done their run, it kind of sorts it all out, apart from Charles. Charles was really in trouble. It was like, oh my God, he's out. He's in the drop zone. And then Ferrari pulled it out of the fire, like, within the last 2 laps for each of them, because Leclerc goes and just creeps into the one, and then Brian already ruined what happened with Carlos Sainz.
It was so good.
Point talking about.
I don't know how he did that. He set the fastest lap. He went from, as they were saying on TV, 0 to hero. And Chuckles Leclerc was, as you said, driver at risk. He was 15th. I mean, he barely made it through. But
squeaked through, yeah.
There was so much traffic at the end. We've talked about this, ways we might fix F1. One of the things I suggested, if we weren't going to shoot out quali, which Fernando liked and you liked and I liked. I'd like to see these shorter time frames on quali. I think it puts extra pressure on the teams to not screw around as much and get some laps in and creates a sense of urgency. 12 minutes for SQ1. I do like that. I thought that
Is
was
it
good.
also, is this one a little bit artificial as well, though? Because isn't Austria one of the, if not the
Shortest.
shortest on the
Shortest, yeah,
track?
yeah.
So watching them all try to jockey for position, there's not as much track to
Right.
line themselves out on. So actually, that trying to get that traffic-free running seemed to be so hard here. And Hamilton just he kind of blames the team like he always does. Oh, okay, hey guys, you put me in traffic there. So well, I think it's a team effort. But anyway, you got screwed by traffic, so you're out. Joe's out, Piastri's out, Bottas and Sargent.
Y-
Um,
I hadn't thought of that. If this were at Spa, Carlos doesn't make SQ2. He doesn't have enough time
No,
to get around. I hadn't
he
thought of that.
just he crossed the checkered flag line, didn't he? With kind of
Like 10 or
he
12 or
just
something. Yeah,
it
he
was
didn't
like
have
there's
much.
almost nothing left when he managed to go round and get that flying lap in and put the fastest lap. So yeah, anything longer of a track and he didn't have enough time to get round. Shootout 2, George didn't take part. His car was proper broken. They
Yeah.
kind of we see you Ferrari, we raise you on. We're not even going to get back out. So he was out. Um, Not a lot really. That one actually was a little bit less exciting.
Yeah.
So Russell we obviously lost. De Vries we lost. Sonoda, Gasly, and Albon. But which meant both races were through to Shootout 3,
And we
which
had
was
Gunther on the pit wall, and I'm like
yeah.
between them going through, and I was loving this. I thought it was cool. The interview, I enjoyed the Haas's going through. And at this point, you're kind of watching again, and you're saying to yourself, interestingly, Norris was fifth in SQ2. So you're like, is this for real? Is this,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
you would say as a Brit, Renaissance, or as we'd say, Renaissance? Is this happening?
Not sure I'd ever use that word, but okay.
It's happening. And then we go into SQ3. It's a wet session. Run what you want because of the whole thing is wet. You can run whatever tires you want. If you remember, there was that dumb have to have certain types of new tire rule in Baku that kept Lando out. Do you remember that he couldn't even make
That's
SQ2?
right. Yeah, yeah.
That rule would have been in effect if not for the little bit of rain that kind of came through. So we had a debate going in SQ3. One of my favorites: used softs or new mediums, or because it was Bernie Collins, who I think is brilliant. Because it was Bernie Collins, is it used softs or new mediums? And I was cheering for people to go out on the new mediums, and it was fun to watch. Anyway, talk a little bit about SQ3 because I want to talk about how it ended.
Sorry, you just woke me up from you with your tire talk.
Oh, there's more coming in the race.
Yeah, I know there is. I know there is. You talk about. I mean, the not like SQ3 was just Max nailed it, and what else did you want to add? Really, I mean, the Hulk put in fourth was a stupendous lap.
Fourth? I know. That was what I wanted to highlight.
Yeah,
Hulkenberg in fourth. Lando in third. I
yeah.
mean, it is getting out of control. That guy he does like Austria. He's had good results in Austria, and then combine it with the upgrades. I loved it. But yeah, we saw Checo finish second. So we had first time ever in a race with a Red Bull lockout, front row lockout at the Red Bull Ring. I found that hard to believe, but it makes sense, I guess, if you think about it. So that was a bonus stat for you, an SQ sprint quali shootout. And then we get to the sprint. And oh man, I really loved this. I couldn't have loved it more. It was such a great race. A combination of factors we'll get to. First off, though, I have to ask a question. Did anybody else notice that for sprint quali or sprint shootout, I'll get it right eventually, and the sprint race, there was different music when they came back from commercial at the beginning. It wasn't the Formula One thing. Like they show the drivers, that was normal. And then they had like some different background music as Crofty's introducing everything with Anthony Davidson. So I noticed that. Just if anyone else did, great. If you didn't, sorry. And then they gave Leclerc a penalty for obstruction as he was trying to get in the pits, and it made me so angry when I saw that when they showed the grid, because during, I think it was SQ2, I can't even remember where he got the penalty, they showed it, he was pulling into the pits. He's over on the right. There's a white line you have to be inside to get into the pits. He's in it, and yes, the car coming around turn 9 is going to naturally get in the way of that angle to some extent. Where did you want him to go? Off the track? What would you have preferred him to do? To make his car fly? He turbo boost up in the air? I don't know what he could have done.
If it wasn't for the other subject that I'm going to have a rant over, this would have been my Rob's rant for the week. Because literally, what do you expect? Is he, oh, I might hold somebody up, so I better abort my pit stop and go around one more time just in case I don't get in anyone's way? I think they did say when they were discussing it before the penalty was given, they were like, "This could be unfair if he gets one. That he probably will get one, but what's he supposed to do? It's just poor track design. The pit lane entry is just in the position that you're going to slow somebody down. If you're slowing down to enter the pits safely, what's he supposed to like handbrake turn into the pits and like fly in there? I don't know.
Take
Anyway, yeah, that was
a dirt path on the side that you have to take to get around in case someone's.
yeah, that was just stupid.
It was. And then it was raining. We saw the drizzle, like a heavy drizzle, reminded me a ton of Canada. I was having flashbacks to my wet emergency poncho as I'm watching this. I could feel that top-notch plastic stuck against me in every place. And then the question I had, and if I'd been on time, I would have sent it to you on WhatsApp. Hulkenberg starts third, right? Sorry, fourth. Hulk starts fourth. And so I'm wondering if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? Meaning, if Hulkenberg gets his first ever podium, but it's in a sprint, does it count? Can we remove the asterisk?
No, you can't. So, but it's. I mean, as it transpired, it became a non-discussion point anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so they all start on Inters. Apart from, was it Valtteri? Was the same at the back on the
yeah,
on his
it was our friend Valtteri.
You know, why not? Why not?
Hey, give it a shot.
Now, again, if we talk about nothing burgers and press, right? I loved the first few corners from Max and Checo. So
Me too.
Checo starts well, makes Max earn his money by trying to keep him ahead. They get, I think, round into corner 2, is it? And then Checo gets alongside Max and closes the door and probably doesn't leave a car's width on the side. And Max goes up and dips his right wheels onto the grass, right? But you can see that Checo, whether it's the spray, whether it's checking the mirrors, I don't think he squeezed him out because I think as soon as he realizes he's there,
he bounces
if
left.
If he'd have kept position and kept giving Max no track, then you'd have gone, "Oh, Checo, I see what you've done there." I think the moment he pulls across and sees that Max is off on the side, he then goes left and gives him room to rejoin.
Yes.
Fine. Max then overcooks it, trying to send it up the inside, doing exactly the same thing that Checo had done in like whenever it was the formation lap or earlier on in the day. We'd seen Checo on that same braking point,
right,
almost go straight off because he overcooked it. That's what Max does. And then those two almost take each other out. Great. Then we have the world's most unfortunate piece of bad luck. We say that Valtteri, if he had no luck, if he didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck at all. But Lando is hot on the heels here, eyes wide open, watching the two Red Bulls take themselves out. He's going to zoom through. Him and the Hulk are probably going to go off beyond the both of them and be leading the race. But because of bad situation with, apparently he just locked up as he was entering the corner as well, which means his rear wheels had almost stopped spinning. They were coming right down to a slow spin rate. When he saw the two Red Bulls in front of him and he almost collected them, he had to tap the brakes again. That combination of the previous lock up, the low speed, and then tapping the brakes again, kicked his anti-stall mechanism in. And as soon as his anti-stall mechanism came in, 10 cars drove past him, I think.
Oh, he went 2/10. He went
2/10.
8 cars past him.
8 cars went past him because when basically in the anti-stall, when he puts the power down, he's not really getting power. He's just getting the engine going. Please don't stall. Please don't stall. Please don't stall.
Oh, that was so
Having
bad.
about as much power as a regular road car as he tries to exit out of that corner and just watched everybody fly past him. But
that was so rough when that happened. Nico did go up to second briefly ahead of Checo. But, yeah, Max, I mean, of the two, I actually thought Max's was worse. And I know it was wet and he slid and locked up. But you got to predict that a little bit. You're the best driver on the grid in the best car. You basically were pissed because your buddy, give me a break, your teammate, almost ran you off the track in turn 2, and you were going to show him.
Yeah.
And you cut right across the whole turn, took him out. You ruined Lando's race, who is his friend, because of that situation. Lando was basically second row to 10th. And then somewhere in the back, Lewis, who said this whole sprint didn't matter in an interview, which I thought was also a flip, made up 5 spots on the opening lap. I thought the first couple laps of this were great. A bit of the weather, which had impacted the qualy. So we had a jumbled grid, and then we had a bit of weather concerns as everyone's on the inters starting this short race. So I thought it was great. And then we just saw nonstop battling. Like in lap 3 or 4, K-Mag and George were going back and forth for 11th, right ahead of Lewis, and Lewis is putting his nose in there every so often. Like
it was amazing. It was amazing. And and this, I am going to have my mini rant now, and then we'll bring it
Oh,
back later
jeez.
as well.
Oh,
But
please, yeah, let's do it twice. I was hoping to have
and
none, but
even Sky Sports News, the commentary team, are on my side here, even if it's subliminally, because we saw.
they
Uh,
weren't.
no, okay,
I heard
fine.
it. Keep
Hold
going.
that thought. So we saw such a great exhibition of defensive driving in cars that probably aren't as fast as the ones behind. And I think it was Ocon, and he was doing a phenomenal job of keeping faster cars behind him because it's wet and DRS isn't enabled, which means he can put his car in the right places. We saw overtakes that, like on my previous rant about I pine for the good old days where people would line up people a few corners in advance to kind of make their moves. We saw that happening all over the place. It was just proper good old fashioned racing. Great attacking, great defending to fend them off, and then DRS got enabled. And I think it was Crofty or whoever it was said it. Poor old Ocon. Oh no, there's no fire need. You don't want to stoke the rage here, Brian. Um, turn that off now. Um, Crofty said, "Poor old Ocon. All of his hard work is about to disappear because he won't stand a chance of keeping these cars behind him with DRS enabled." And that's exactly what happened within a lap. Within a lap, DRS is on, and suddenly every car that had been fighting are punching above their weight. The ones that had taken the risk and decided to stay on inters and see if the others could hunt them down while they'd gone to softs just had to get the little white flag out and wave surrender and just watch everybody breeze by. And I'm like, oh, an awful end to a great sprint because cars that could have been higher up get the fate overtake and get done. So, but it was great. I mean, I loved it. I did love George's sprint to the end with his softs on.
That was
That
fun.
was oh
He was what was he? He was 0.009 behind Esteban at the line. It was basically it
yeah
said it was a photo finish, and it was. I
yeah.
thought George had him. So I was
I
wrong
did
as
as
they were.
well.
I'm like I think he got him at the line. He didn't. 0.009. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that happened before they turned DRS on. They turned DRS on lap 17. I was on lap 4, and Rob went straight for the rant.
I did.
A couple things I'll just highlight. Right, so George and Magnussen were going, or sorry, Magnussen. George and
Magnussen.
Magnussen were going back and forth, and then Hamilton on Magnussen. Kevin was racing everybody. And you know what? He has had a reputation for being tough, maybe a little dirty of a driver. I thought he was very clean with all of his defending,
Yeah.
and I thought he was. I'm assuming he had a lot of fun. Like I would assume. I mean, he obviously would rather not have George and Lewis go right past him, but Magnussen defended great, and he was in battles the whole race. I mean, kudos to Magnussen. And then we had Checo passing Nico and getting up there as well. Heard a stat. Is this right? Haas has never been on a podium. I mean, I don't know if you know off the
Yeah.
top of it, but it feels right.
Sounds
Maybe
right.
I feel like
Sounds right.
early
Yeah.
on, didn't they have fourth, like their first race or first year in Australia? I can't remember. Or that was the second
Yeah.
year. First year they lost all their tires.
Let's go with it until we're
Yeah,
proven wrong.
sounds good. Anyone listening, if you know if Haas has never had a podium, hit us up on Twitter at F1 Dirty Side. But yeah, you're right. What you mentioned is 100% true about the DRS. And it was Esteban and Charles and Lando. And they were just going back and forth, defending, racing, 3 wide at times. It was amazing. And then they turn on DRS because it's dry enough, and people had already started pitting for slicks. I was nervous at this. Well, not nervous. I was confused, is what I was. Hulk pitted from 6th for slick tires. This is a sprint race. There's not really pit stops planned, right? And so I'm wondering, will he be able to make this up, or was this a horrendous mistake? And it turns out I think it worked because Hulk, what did he end up finishing? He caught Norris, finished 7th. I think that's the way it worked because Norris was still on the inters. And so I doubt he would have only lost one more position if he'd stayed out there. The Haas cars, man, they degrade their tires fast.
They do seem to chew through them, don't they? But what I
Really?
found, I got this a game my son downloaded on the PlayStation. It was one of the free ones last month, Grid Rivals or Grid Legends or something, right? And there's a certain race in there called Multiclass where like slow trucks start a lap ahead of like fast cars, and the idea is the fast ones try to catch the trucks by the end. That's what this was with the inters versus the softs, because like you say, people pitted and had to make up 20 seconds on a short track with about 6 laps left. And you're like, well, this is suicide. What the hell have you done that for? But oh my god, were they right? They were just rocket ships
Yeah.
on the slicks. And like you say, and with George coming back as well, that was fun. It was fun, and it kind of promised a lot for today's race, which I loved it. I
I thought
did
it was
love
great.
it.
I thought it was a great
I thought it
race.
was great.
Second year in a row, I thought Austria over-delivered.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's just the track design is just good for racing. But where do you want to start? Because you love to do the tire stuff at the beginning. So why don't you give us the rundown of what caught your eye about tire selection?
Well, a couple things. First of all, it was predicted to be a two-stopper, but we had questions. Fernando starts on hards. I'm sitting here saying they're going for a one-stopper at Aston Martin. Maybe he can manage the tires. Maybe the car's gentle on tires. We had the three softest compounds. We had the C5, C4, C3. So we had the softest of softest tires. You wake up. For people on YouTube, Rob's sleeping. Or actually, I guess for people not on YouTube, because people on
Yeah,
YouTube
yeah.
can see
People
it.
on YouTube will see it, Brian. That's how that medium works. But
I'll pick this up soon enough. And so it was going to be fun, right? What is going to happen? And Max starts on mediums, and we've watched the Red Bull as one of the gentler cars on its tires. So the question I'm thinking is, can Max pull off like a one-stopper? And we'll come back to that. I want to hold that because when we get to some stops and they keep going, I want to revisit that quickly. But man, the start was interesting. I loved it in terms we had Lewis getting Lando because there was kind of like a little kerfuffle among many cars. Max and Charles had a great back and forth. And then we get to turn 4, and Yuki goes off crazy. Valtteri got pinched. Of course, as we said, if he had no luck, the only luck he has is bad luck. He got pinched. It was Yuki also was dive bombing in turn 1 and ran into Ocon and pinched Valtteri. I'm like, what was Yuki doing? Like, did
I
he
don't
think that
know.
was going to stick? I don't know what he was doing at that point.
It's just, yeah. If you ever see anybody get caught in a situation where it's not their fault and they just get pinched in between cars or some
It'll be
get broken
Valtteri.
off their car, it'll be Valtteri. 100% it'll be Valtteri, but never mind. Yeah, I mean, that start with Charles and Max kind of got me a little bit overexcited that the pace was in the Ferrari because for a while he was keeping pace with them. He threw it up the inside a couple of times as if he was going to have the pace to overtake him. I was like, oh my God, we're going to get a race. And then it was quite quickly 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Away. But
Uh,
yeah, I mean, there was some great racing going on like in the pack, and here I'll dip into DRS again, but not for the rant of it, but more for this whether it's this track, I don't know. Okay, I'll go on the rant side first. You've put the stat here. It's
yeah, I did.
35% of the race is DRS, right? But
Yes.
there's only one detection zone,
Two.
which
There's two.
is it two? Okay, so
Yeah, 3
but
zones, 2 detections.
that's right. Okay, I knew. Yeah, yeah. So problem with that here we saw was that where you make an overtake very, very quickly after the detection zone, if you overtake then in the next DRS section, when really the guy behind is the one who needs it now, because the whole point of it is to help facilitate the overtaking, the guy who's gone past him is like, unlucky, I've got DRS again, despite the fact that I've got nobody in front of me now and could just pull away again. So that was a bit weird. And we'll come to it about the chicken on the line again.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
But
But I actually really, so I appreciate your DRS rants as your friend, as your co-host, as someone who can't figure out how to replace you with someone else. I appreciate your DRS rants. I don't fully disagree. I'm not as strong-willed about this as you are. I know you and JP on Discord. Hold on. I know you and JP on Discord get going about DRS like two old men get off my lawn. But let me say this. I actually think it works here. And let me give me a second to kind of defend it. The line, the second detection line you're talking about, yes, 100% you got to game it before you get to turn 3. I understand that. But we didn't see a lot of home straight overtakes. And we didn't see a ton into turn 1 because it's a shorter straight and it's an uphill turn 1. So it's less powerful DRS. What it does is it gets you it keeps you close to the car in front of you and allows you to get ready to tee people up. And the place where most of the overtakes happened were turn 3, which was risky. I mean, you had to be committed and you had to be smart. And a lot of people had to back out because they may have gotten close enough, but it just wasn't long enough of a DRS up that hill into 3. And then 4 is such a hazard to go around the outside. And drivers were setting people up so that they had to go around the outside if they wanted to use DRS to pass. And it became like, 4, 5, 6. They were just kind of pushing each other side to side the whole way through. I think maybe, so here's my point. I think maybe the length of the DRS zones was short enough, if you will, that it allowed people to get close, but you still had to defend. it wasn't just a motoring by on a straightaway. There was no, I don't remember any straightaway overtakes,
Okay,
mainly corners.
so I would say to you that um, DRS Zone 1 in Austria today is the perfect example of how I'd like, if it has to stay, I 100% agree with you. That's how it should be. There were, I think, no overtakes down that DRS home straight over the start finish line. Like you say, absolutely right. It did enough to pull you into the area to tempt you into diving up the inside at turn one, but it didn't give you a free pass. Chef's kiss for that's how DRS should be. We saw a lot of, though, to your point, in the second half of the or the third DRS zone, whichever one it was now, where towards the end of the race, they became the gimmies. They became like
Yeah.
when Checo finally got Sainz. Sainz was trying to defend for his life for 3/4 of a lap, but it didn't matter because we got the breeze by later. However, what DRS also did here today was because the track, maybe it's because the lap is so short, and maybe because the cars kept, therefore, are kind of all close together. We had an amazing midfield battle going on where they kept calling it a DRS train on TV, but I'm like, kind of. It's almost like we're almost back to the sprint from yesterday now, because when everyone's got DRS, no one has. And
Right.
therefore, everybody was having to size people up, defend, proper overtakes. Bizarrely, somehow, the DRS train today was amazing.
It was, and
Because,
it was like four or five cars at times, and they were two,
yeah.
three wide. And as people would battle, other people would stick their nose in, like, "Well, if you guys are busy over there, I'm gonna take you on the inside." And then they'd all come back around. And yeah, I agree. So I didn't hate it as much as you did. I did. We'll get to the Checo thing later about how he used it. But we had great racing. I mean, we had Stroll.
Yeah.
Stroll was getting Hulkenberg, who went off. The gas man came up next on him. Albon. We haven't talked a lot about Williams, and the fact that their flat floor paid off in Canada, at least allowed them to be competitive in Canada and now in Austria. And I love seeing Albano mixing it up with people. He had people right. He was hanging on the cars in front of him. He had Ocon and others right behind him. It was exciting. And then we got the first thing that really made me mad. It was around lap 10 when Carlos had pace and Charles was not quite with the same pace, and he's right behind him. And he asked basically for permission to attack Charles, and they told him to maintain position effectively. And you and I both went crazy on this. It gives a bad taste in my mouth when you don't allow teams to battle each other. And I recognize it's dangerous, but some of my favorite moments were like in the sprint when we had Checo and Max on each other. If you go back to Jeddah last year, the Alpines were battling each other, and Otmar, you could see him tearing his hair out. I mean, I love that. I love teammates battling each other when it's, I don't know, for something. And this was for something.
But even if you want to go to the thing that I don't like so much, the team orders, and just switch them around, Carlos obviously had the pace at that point in the race.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, it's strategic. I'm like, I don't get what's strategic here. If you're trying to guarantee the best result for the team, so let's not favour one driver over another here, then if Carlo's got the pace, okay, he's probably not going to catch Max, but he's going to do a better job of getting closer to Max than Charles was at that point. Charles just didn't seem as fast, so I don't really get it. I wish Carlo had been able to just kind of go, screw you, I'm going for it.
Yeah, exactly. Battle for the
just
spot.
take
It
it.
is racing. It was Michael Massey once said, "Let's go racing." Anyway, then speaking of Mercedes, Lewis reports over the radio, the car is slow, and then he gets some black and white flag, and he's like, "I can't turn it." This was the beginning of Lewis's just rant of a weekend on the radio. Made him look like a young driver as opposed to the mature champion that we usually see. Hulk pits, comes out, and whatever they did in the pit stop didn't work because the engine exploded. It was going great. They put new tires on, and I think somebody put some sugar in the engine tank, in the gas tank, and it blew up. VSC, and then everything started.
Sorry, by the way, I didn't notice this, but Engine Mode 11 did on Instagram. When Hulk blew up and drove his car off the track and parked over on the side, he got a track limits violation for that.
He did? I didn't. I don't know if you're being serious or not, but
no, seriously, there was a track limit violation. So because it's just automatic, it's just sensors when you go outside it. So
funny. So at first, the top 6 stayed out, partially because some of them were past the pits when the VSC was called. But then the Ferraris came in the next lap around, which hurt them. Because the teams who'd pitted earlier pulled an undercut to some extent on fresher tires. Tires mattered. Fresher tires mattered this weekend. again, because of the soft compounds. I like this. Make the tires matter. Put some strategy into things. But they had slow stops anyway. I mean, they had 4 or 5 second
4.5
stops.
seconds, weren't they?
That was
Yeah.
bad. And it wasn't even a double stack, really. It was, but it wasn't as tight as we've seen people pull off. And then it's lap 16, and I don't know if it's because it's early in the morning or because I'm not that smart. I had no idea what was happening. I was so confused at this point because some people had pitted, some people hadn't. We had different people staying out for track positions. We had people pitting on different laps. We had penalties now racking up for Lewis and Yuki.
And everyone else on the grid.
Well, those are coming. Those are incoming. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, wait, but who's winning? I mean, after Max. After Max, who's winning? And it was so confusing because we didn't have Checo up there yet. Anyway, it was fun to watch. I loved it. And we kind of got this interesting, by lap 18, it all, for me, shaken out where I understood it. We had Max, Charles, Checo, Lewis, Carlos, Lando, and Fernando, and everyone had stopped except the Red Bulls. And the loser of all this was Aston Martin. Fernando at the back of the group I just mentioned, and Lance Stroll was in 15th. And they pitted Fernando off of hards on lap 16. I didn't
quite get that. I mean,
you weren't in
not
the
the
safety
tire
car
whisperer
window.
that you are, but
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what was going on with that one. But then we saw. Was it then we saw? Now I'm kind of daydreaming here, but no, it's the Red Bulls come in later, right? It's a few laps later. We knew it was coming. I was looking at the clock. I was looking at the clock all the time at this point to see the delta that Max had out front. I'm like, this isn't a pit stop. He doesn't have a pit stop in his
lap
pocket.
25. He said 21 in the cooldown room.
This 3,000 million laps led consecutively record is coming to an end unless he can stretch this a little bit longer. But then the longer it went, Charles was actually eating into it and it was coming down. And it was like, this is going to be over now. Which kind of didn't mind, but it would have been nice to see how far he could have pushed the record. But we reset the lap counter to 0 on, what was it, lap 25? Did you have?
I think it was 25 I wrote, but he said 21 in the cooldown room. And who am I to tell Max he's wrong? But it was 25, Max. You're wrong. Anyway, so then more penalties. Ocon comes out on an unsafe release. Yuki serves his penalty, but again screwed up serving it, as we found out later. I don't know why that's so hard. I don't get it. They've changed the rules because of some confusion this year. So you can't touch the car for 5 seconds. It's no longer you're able to touch it a little. You just can't work on it. There was a whole big deal. Can't touch car 5 seconds when it stopped. Why is that so hard? Why are we still having people screw this up regularly?
I don't know. Wasn't it Yuki
there's
last
my rant.
time?
That was
was it somebody else that did it? Remember the race earlier in the season?
I think it was Ocon.
Penalty on top of penalty.
I think it was Ocon. They piled up. He had
right.
15 seconds of extra penalties from screwing up the first penalty. Anyway, so Max then takes Carlos back pretty fast. Checo pits right after that. Max goes down to 10th. And at this point, I just like to pause for a second. On lap 28, Lando's still in 4th place. I mean, that's amazing. McLaren fans must be so excited. I'm a Lando fan to some extent. I'm not a McLaren fan per se, but I'm watching this just so engrossed to see where he's going to finish. I'm like, this is wild.
Yeah, if this is a sign of things to come, that let's just take today's race. We know that Max is out in the distance, but if we now start looking at Ferrari seem to have some pace.
Yes.
McLaren are coming back to the table. Aston are not head and shoulders above being the best of the rest now. So you've got this kind of McLaren, Aston, Ferrari party going on.
And Mercedes says they're bringing a bunch of upgrades next week.
Just where I was going. Yeah, you got Mercedes kind of knocking on the door potentially. If we are going to get some design convergence as everyone, let's not say copies, let's use the word inspired by each other's side pod designs, seeing the underside of floors. Stuff is going.
Special.
Exactly, the Monaco special, and then and the side pod redesign as everyone kind of gravitates towards the Red Bull design. It's just going to bring all of those things together. Now, I don't see it being enough for any of them to go really challenge Red Bull. That's locked and loaded for this season now. But if the rest of them, if McLaren, if Lando's going to be up there regularly, it's going to be brilliant. It was great racing today. It really was.
Great. It totally was. And then we got my favorite, second favorite team radio of the day on lap 32. Charles, what do you think of a 9-stopper?
Question?
And he said, no, thanks. No, they asked him seriously about a 3-stopper. He goes, what do you think about going to a 3-stop? He's like, no, and then just kept driving. Why would they? I mean, I'm sure they were running some kind of models. They must have known that getting on and off the mediums at the right time was the thing to do. But 3-stopper?
I know. And then if you want to understand what I meant by leaving your car in a space to squeeze someone else off the track is what I think Checo didn't do to Max right at the beginning because he pulled back over and left some space.
Yeah.
Just go and take a look at Nick on De Vries on K-Mag.
Oh God.
That's the definition of not leaving anybody any
That
space and then staying there to not give him any space. Poor old K-Mag there.
I mean,
Because
that was totally Nick. Like, I mean, I watched that. I'm like, oh, that's got to be a penalty. And I'm happy he got the
100%.
penalty. He ran him off the track.
Oh, 100%. And that accounted for, because we didn't see it in real time. It was a replay we saw it on, right? And I think we'd seen Max go past Charles, or we'd seen somebody go
Yep.
through, and there was this big kind of smoke vapor in the air. It was kind of like, what's that? Has somebody been off? Have we lost one of the leaders? And then it's no, it was K-Mag getting pushed right through the gravel. So, yeah, a well-deserved penalty there.
And really fast, Albon's penalty came up next for track limits. We mentioned, I think, all of them so far. Ocon slowed down trying to serve his penalty with his slow stop. But at this point, this is how I enjoyed the race. This was the only point where I felt there was a lull. It was lap 41. No one was within DRS of anyone except Nick and K-Mag, who were still battling for 18th. That was the only point. Otherwise, there was always somebody right on someone's bumper looking to make a move. I thought it was a great race. And then Gasman got a penalty. I mean, they were going left and right. We had penalties flying at this point.
Yeah, and I've got to be honest, I'm scanning ahead because I was having trouble taking the notes app wasn't working for me today, so I was kind of memorized some of this stuff. But I was so engrossed in watching it, I also forgot to go and write my own notes down as well. But so Sainz got a penalty. He got a 5-second penalty, right?
Yes.
Now, did he serve it on a pit stop?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think he had to have because
He stopped
I'm
after
watching towards the end, and I know I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but I'm watching his battle with Lando, and he finally got past Lando, and I'm thinking, right, he needs to eke out 5 seconds over Lando now because he's got a 5-second time penalty. But the commentators weren't mentioning it, and he couldn't shake Lando. Lando stayed within DRS and stayed within DRS and stayed within DRS. And I'm like, oh my God.
I'm pretty sure he served it on his second stop because that's when we hit the second round of stops, lap 46. We started seeing everyone do their second stop, so he would have done it then.
He must have done it then. I just didn't clock it, or they didn't show it, or because I was so confused towards the end when I'm like, why aren't they making a bigger deal about Lando's like staying within 5 seconds here? Because apparently
Fernando behind him. Didn't Fernando have one too? I can't remember.
I think everybody had one.
Yuki got a 10-second one. I missed for what? Like he didn't serve the first one right? I don't know.
Yeah, they do the double whammy thing, don't they? You're not
guess.
just going to have to come in and do another 5 seconds because you didn't get your first seconds right. We're going to make it a 10-second one when you.
Well, because you're going to redo the first 5, and we'll give you 5 for getting it wrong. Is really, I think, what it is.
I know it is, but it just really compounds the whole thing.
It does. It does. That's the Ocon special from earlier in the season. Lap 64. Lap 56. I didn't want to miss this. We had Checo taking Lando when he went wide at turn 3. A lot of people going wide at turn 3 as they were defending, which I again thought was exciting. It goes back to why I enjoyed a little bit of the DRS. But this was the point where Sainz, and now he's up on Sainz, Checo is, lap 57, 58, 59, amazing battling. And we know the Red Bull is the fastest car with DRS. If you actually take the Red Bulls out of the DRS rant, I actually thought it worked really well. But Checo kept going too soon up into turn 3 on Carlos, giving Carlos the DRS after turn 3 and allowing him to stay next to each other. He did it 3 times in a row, and Anthony Davidson is screaming at the TV, someone get on the radio and tell him to stop doing that.
So people that kind of say that they'd like to see DRS stay and amended through either the shortening, like we said, I really think DRS Section 1 today worked beautifully because it encouraged that dive bombing into corner 1 like it should. The second thing people talk about is being able to use it whenever you want to so that you could use it to defend. And we kind of got a little, because of Checo's inability to work out like Max did this like in 1 lap, I think it was with Charles. Yeah. He worked out, he brake tested Charles so he'd pick up the DRS, and then he went past Charles, and then he got DRS even though he
motored
was
off into the sunset.
Motored off into the distance. This is why maybe the mentality of what makes a great racer versus a good racer, Max being great, Checo being good, because it took Checo 3 or 4 laps to work this thing out, right? And because of what happened there, it kind of gave a little insight as to how might happen if a driver was allowed to use DRS to defend. So if you had the kind of, you've got 60 seconds and you push a button, you can use it whenever you like. We saw Sainz kind of being able to do that. And we saw a reverse DRS where Sainz was able to defend against Checo because he kind of had it in a weird way.
Right, and Checo
But it
didn't
was
have it.
great.
It
It was
was.
great. We had 4 laps of signs going, oh my God, could he keep doing this? I was thinking, is he going to purposefully do this every time? And then finally, Checo was like, oh, hang on a minute. If I don't go early on that corner, I'll get it. And as soon as he worked that out, he just breezed past
Well, he
him.
pulled
But
the switcheroo. He goes to the outside, goes behind him, gets DRS, switcheroo inside, and then see ya.
exactly. So that for me, if anybody does want to look at like if they are petitioning to kind of change DRS so you get that kind of like limited use, but you can use it whenever you want. That Carlos Sainz situation there for 4 laps was just brilliant because he was almost being able to use it in a defensive mechanism, which was fantastic.
We had some great battles at this point in the midfield and backfield. We had Valtteri, K-Mag, and Yuki battling for 16th like they were going for the championship. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of this. And there were other cars in and out of there, but it was really Valtteri and Yuki and Magnussen who really went for it. Lap 67. And I mean, they were trading paint. I think they rubbed tires. It was phenomenal racing. And you know what? We can talk about Yuki dive bombing lap 1 and going in the gravel then at the turn 4, I think it was on lap 1. We can talk about, K-Mag and his history of tough defending, and we can talk about how much we love Valtteri, but those three guys are epic drivers. And anyone who makes F1, I think you're right, they are the top 20 in the world, because if you watched these three guys in cars that are subpar compared to some of the top cars, that was hell of a
was
driving.
amazing. It was brilliant.
The last two things I have on the race itself. In the race, we didn't talk about this. It was lap 52, but it was my least favorite radio message. Lewis had been complaining so bad about people's track limits. He became the hall monitor. He was complaining about the car. And Toto finally had enough. He'd been on the radio once already. He went on again, and he said, and I'm quoting, "Lewis, we know the car is bad. Please drive it." Oh, my God.
Yeah,
Can you imagine being at work and like your job is to make the spreadsheet and you're just whinging on about Excel and not getting the data, and your boss comes around and goes, "Hey, just do the Excel. Just do the spreadsheet, man." That's what that was. That was bad. I mean,
and it was. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum of just pure brilliance, and confidence in both one's ability and also that your team aren't going to screw it up by doing a slow pit stop. Max is like, do you know what? I think I want all the points this weekend, so I'm going to stop for slicks. And I don't know that did we hear the team radio of them say no?
Yeah,
or did the commentary team just say
let's not. I think they
let's
said
not. Yeah. And it's like, get those
I'm
tires
coming
ready
in.
because I'm coming in. I'm gonna if I have to put them on myself, I will. So I'm coming in. And I'm like, well, your average time lost here is like 20-21. He's got a 23-second lead. I mean, this is tight. This is pressure on that team that if one wheel gun man screws the pooch here, they're giving away a win. But oh my God, they did a 2.3-second stop. He comes out, I think it was 2.5 seconds ahead of Charles. And in one lap,
2.5 more seconds.
One solitary lap, 2.5 more, finishes 5 seconds ahead, crosses the line, smoking a cigar, getting the fastest lap. The crowd are going nuts, but probably inside his helmet, all we're hearing is bow, 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 as he just big times it across the line. I'm like, hats off to you, Max Verstappen, because that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, amazing.
Just brilliant.
Charles finished second, as you said. Checo finished third, finished on the podium for the first time in Austria, although I'm kind of getting into my stats. He finished third, went from 15th place to third, which is commendable, and he was in the conversation for driver of the day, but he still wouldn't be king of the pits because in my mind, you got to be the whole weekend, and he hosed up a lot of the weekend. Sainz fourth, fifth Norris. Good job, Lando Norris. Good job, McLaren. I hope Zach Brown is celebrating like he's the king of the world, because I think he would do that. Alonso, then Hamilton, then eighth George, who was in witness protection for most of the race. I didn't even know he was still racing. I'd forgotten about George Russell today. If it weren't for Alex Albon and his cry of George like this, you couldn't even convince me he's an F1 driver. I saw him nothing today, which is a shame. And then the gas man, who also we didn't see a ton of. He had a couple early battles. Lance 10th, and then Albano 11th. Good job, Alex Albon. And why did I go to 11? Not just because you can go to 11 and it's better than 10. That was the last person on the lead lap. I did a little research kind of leading into some stats. Everybody after Albon was lapped. So, and by the way, Max pitted extra time. So,
by the way, I think have you got your I want to give a shout out to who I think finished 13th, and I think you've got the little ditty that you sometimes play for it because we've given him such a bad rap because Albon's
Oh,
putting the other Williams so high
yes.
up, and he's been
I know who
right at
you're
the
going
back
for.
today in 13th. And
Wait,
can
I
he
don't.
find the sound clip as I try to extend this for a little bit
Still
longer?
don't have it.
Finishing
Got it.
finishing in 13th was
Logan the Sergeant. He even had a
as we
penalty.
headed
He got a penalty
exactly.
late. He got a 5-second penalty in the last few laps and still finished 13th. So, yeah.
So coming into July 4th week, and Sargent goes and celebrates by getting a well-deserved. He did a good drive, made amends. I just now when we did the review of the sprint, kind of said, look, he had the upgrades that Albon had, and really can't make the most of it. So he's massively under pressure. Well, I think he went some way to relieving that. And if we both agree, I think that King of the Pits is going to align with the official vote, and we both think Lando gets King of the Pits this week. Yeah,
Agreed. But
I
I
think
would also have Carlos second. You put Sargent up there, or what were you about to say? Sorry.
no. I
Oh,
think I just wanted to give Sargent a shout out for
yeah,
the
okay.
for bringing it home in 13th. But if King of the Pits is Lando, for me, the Pits is the man really under pressure now is Nick De Vries.
Oh, my God. Agreed. I
Just
I agree. I don't even have sound for Nick. I gotta agree with you, and I feel bad. Like I really like him. I like his interviews. I
yeah,
like his backstory. I like what he's done to get there. I like what he did last year in the Williams. I don't think there's anything not to like about Nick De Vries. It's just he's had so many problems. Had the whole Baku weekend was a disaster. He's had accidents, spins. I'm not saying he's Nikita Mazepin. Trust me, I'm not saying that. He's far better than that. But he has not acquitted himself well, and the one team you don't get extra time on is Red Bull or the Red Bull sister team, Alpha Tauri, whatever we want to call it next year. His seat has got to be super hot.
has to be. It has to be because you just had where did he kind of? And I know he didn't finish. Where did Nick end up? He's 15th, right? Which isn't really that bad. But when you think about Hulkenberg was out, Magnussen and Sonoda all had issues. Piastri didn't have the upgrades. I think they're saying the McLaren Piastri will
He
get
had
them
the
in
old car.
Silverstone.
Yep,
Bottas had his front wing hanging off. So they all that crew all had kind of like problems. De Vries didn't really get involved in any problems, so he just trundled at the back of the rest of them. And I think Sargent beating him today is not good news for him. So
I agree. Although the Williams is good on these tracks, so I'm happy
it
Sargent
is,
showed
yeah,
something. I
true.
loved this race. I really did. I loved the weekend, the strategy, where you had the question on the tire compounds and how many stops using softer tires. We've been saying this for a while. Like, put some jeopardy in the tires, and we don't mean exploding, we mean degrading. And
Yeah,
you had that. The DRS worked, and my notes long before we got into this conversation was it was not too powerful. You still had to
agree.
overtake and use it. There was some peril if you really wanted to go into some of the corners and do it. Teams could defend a bit, fight back a little. I did not like the track limits, but it added zest. So, like, I'm not arguing it. If they're going to police it the way they did. I thought that was
Yeah.
fine. And I still don't like sprint weekends, but sometimes they look fine at the parent-teacher conference. You all right over there? All right.
Gosh,
All right.
I
So can
think
we do a couple
yeah,
stats?
gotta do the stats because we've got to move away from your
SAP Stats, Austria GP edition, long weekend, lots of good stuff. We're going to focus on the race. There were 9 penalties in this race, which was just insanity. As I already mentioned, the driver of the day was Lando, Carlos, and then Checo. I don't agree with that, 21% for Checo, but I get it if it's of the day. This was Max's 5th win in a row, 7th of the season. Red Bull's won all 9 races so far this year. Therefore, Checo's won the other 2 by process of elimination. He topped every session Max did this weekend. Just, I know we've mentioned it, but when you go back and look, and we're recording this fast, so I did my stats as quickly as I could. He topped FP1, if you remember, on medium tires when other people were on softs. He won he was pole in quali. He was pole in sprint shootout. He won the sprint and he won the race. He had the fastest lap. The only time he didn't lead basically the whole thing was when he pitted and Charles and Carlos overtook him. He would have had, I don't even know what you do call that, a super grand slam. I don't even know. It's like a double grand slam. He
no.
almost had it, but didn't have it. 81-point lead.
Did you play your max triple this week?
I know I played that already this season, so
Oh,
now
okay.
people will be catching me. 81-point lead over Checo, who went from 15th to 3rd on the grid, as we said. Max could stay in first place right now and use 80 of those extra points to also be 6th on the grid. in terms of race standings. Not saying he's so basically the person in fifth is Carlos with 86, and since you can't lap yourself, he's therefore lapped all but 4 drivers in the championship standings. And it was, as I'd mentioned briefly, Checo's first podium in 4 races, and I believe his first podium at Austria. It was fun. It was a good weekend. It was a lot of fun to watch, and I enjoyed it. Rob, you obviously enjoyed it, but the question is, what did Paul think? And before we get to his review, which is hot off the press, let's hear about Mr. Pitside.
Hey all, Austria Grand Prix done and dusted. Back from here to Silverstone. Home race for me. Sprint weekends always good fun. I don't mind them, they're pretty good. It's quite noisy in here at the moment. Everyone's sort of packing down the hospitality unit I'm sat in because again we're all getting ready to go off to Silverstone. It's quite a long drive for the guys that are here, so it's a bit of a pad down and a bit of a race across to be able to get there in time. Anti's just come in, he's bought me a beer, and so I'll cheers that. That's always a sign that the weekend is finished. For us, yeah, you know, as it was, sprint weekend didn't really go. We tried a nice little gamble with dry tyres at the start, which turned out to be crazy. But so on and so forth. That's racing. You have to gamble sometimes, you know, when you're that far down. I can't really remember the sprint race. Max sort of drove off, and then sort of a little bit happened. It was okay, I guess. And then as for the race again today, it was quite a lot of incidents, quite a lot of activity. So on the whole, it was actually a good race. It was good to celebrate a Friday not being ridiculously boring with 2 practice sessions. So 3 cheers for sprint races. Let's be honest with you. It makes a race weekend into actually 3 days instead of 2 days in one day where you want to shoot your own face. In terms of Austria, I was researching some of the wildlife after my insight into the beaver in the Canada episode, and apparently the brown bear is one of the most famous animals that lives in Austria, and then of course a falcon and wild boar, basically animals that will kill you and rip you to pieces. Which, given the personnel of Austria's tarnished history, that's probably keeping with the nation. But it's a fantastic place. It is one of the greatest on the calendar to go to. It's scenic, it's beautiful. The people here are fantastic. Everyone wears lederhosens, which, if I'm being hand on heart honest, I fail to ever look at anyone wearing one and don't think they look ridiculous. But there's nothing wrong with people wearing things that are quite close and local to them. Good thing over here as well is the love of beer and alcohol. As you know, I don't tend to drink, so it doesn't really impact me too much, but I know Rob would definitely fail to finish beers here, given his form in Canada, which obviously is still carrying over. But that's Austria done. Like I said, onwards to Silverstone. A lot of teams big updates there. Mercedes looked to take a big step forward. I know they weren't overly happy with the car today. Perez drove a decent race, I guess. He come through reasonably well. Ferraris looked like they did okay. There was some talk at the start about strategies, so on and so forth. But let's be fair, second and fourth, they'll take that. Lando Norris, he thrives at this circuit, loves it. And then behind there was your usual sort of gaggle of cars, and that was about it. One DNF. And there's a question for you guys to debate. How many DNFs have there been this season compared to seasons gone by? Because for some reason there seems like it's hardly any. So I'll let you debate that, and I will look forward to getting on my plane shortly back to the UK, where I am for a few weeks, back home, ready for Silverstone. The greatest race on the calendar, but of course I'm biased.
Paul, thank you, man. That was a great review.
The only problem is that I love the fact that in the same clip he tries to claim that he's not into alcohol and doesn't drink beer, yet we heard him clinking bottles and accepting a beer right at the beginning of the clip. So,
yeah,
but yes.
So that's actually a good point. I don't have a stat on this, but I was thinking this during the race about the DNF. I swear to God, I did think this when towards the end of the race, I was looking to see who was 20th and realized Hulk had gone out, which I'd forgotten, but towards the end of the race, and realized it was only one. We've had at least 2 races this year where we had no DNFs and no yellows. I'm fairly confident.
I think that's one for SAP stats. We need to set you on this. And how many DNFs so far this calendar year compared to previous years? And I would already stake a claim that this must be one of the lowest DNF seasons in history, because it just does feel like everyone's nailed the reliability. We just haven't seen external combustion engines, or crashes are going to happen and people are going to drop out through crashes, but even that seems low. So
very low.
Anywho, like Paula mentioned, both probably Paul and I very biased about Silverstone for being one of the greatest tracks on the calendar. The British Grand Prix went back and forth between Silverstone and Brands Hatch and Aintree between 50 to 1987, but since 1987 it has been Silverstone, baby. An RAF airbase from the 40s, 3.661 miles with 18 corners, one of which is named after me, Vale Corner. Thank you, Silverstone, for keeping that named after me. Appreciate it.
If you go to that corner and pour a beer on it, does it just sit there?
How many corners you got named after you, Brian? Come on, tell me about how many sack corners we got in F1.
Just wait.
Sorry?
Vegas will have 3.
Vegas will have 3. Okay,
I just have to go win a couple $1 trillion and donate it all quickly.
Where are we? Lap record is 1 minute 27.097, which Max set in 2020. I think I updated the stats this week, Brian. In actual fact, I registered the Dirty Side as a registered user of Wikipedia and updated their stats because they hadn't updated the win count since last year. So look at that, you see, me on top of things.
I do have a little beef with you. Say your next stat. No, say your next stat about who wins there, the win count. Say it.
What?
Your next one. Who's won there? The win count. Talk about it.
Lewis with 8. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going.
Alonso 2.
Yeah.
Sainz 1.
Yeah, and
they're the only active drivers with wins here. Yeah.
So that's not right.
Oh, okay. Who's
just before coming on air, Max has won there. In 2020, he won, but it wasn't called the British Grand Prix. In 2020, he won because it wasn't called the British Grand Prix. So it's this whole...
this is the British... This is your whole thing like last week when you
Correct.
when you mushed together the Austrian GP and the Styrian GP.
Yes.
And I thought I got all my stats wrong because you decided to do stats for the track, not stats for the Grand Prix.
I use Stats F1, which is by far the best website in the history of the world. And they include Max's 9th ever win. Here's another stat. His 9th ever win in
GP.
F1. No, it was the 70th anniversary GP, which is lesser known.
Gosh.
Max won from in his 9th win, 2020, 70th anniversary at Silverstone.
Okay, maybe that one then I'll give you. But like last week when you smushed together Styrian and Austrian, you can't do that.
But it's the same COVID problem. Styrian existed because of COVID the same way that the 70th GP.
Yeah, but I would argue that like whenever the European Grand Prix got held at Silverstone, that isn't the British Grand Prix, so you can't mix those two things together.
I know.
So.
I get. This is a hard one though, because it's not like it exists.
I'll let you off. I'll let you off.
So keep going, brother.
So what else? Then that means that this one's probably out by 1 as well. Then so Ferrari 18 wins, McLaren 14, Williams 10, Mercedes 9. I'm guessing we're going to say Red Bull 4 then for
3 or 4, depending on Wikipedia or Stats F1, and if you count the 70th anniversary.
But the one that I like to smile about of
too.
the active drivers that have the wins is Saints. Saints getting his. A weekend to make him smile forever, I think, last year. 2022.
Such a good
race. First ever pole in wet conditions, and he converted that first ever pole into a first ever win. I mean, just chef's kiss weekend for Saints. One of my favorite tracks with one of my favorite drivers in my favorite team, and he nailed it. It was such a good weekend.
It also produced a couple things about last year's race. It also produced 2 amazing sound clips. If you remember, Charles was, I think, leading, and then Carlos was behind him, and I don't know if it was Max or somebody else. Someone was behind Lewis, and they wanted Carlos to back up the traffic behind the safety car. And they said, give him a 10-spot lead, and Carlos gets over the radio and gives him one of these.
Stop inventing.
I'm like 90% sure that was at the British GP, because then he went on to win. And this is one of the races. So if people who may not, if you're newer and you didn't watch the 2022 British GP, go back and watch it. And especially towards the end, there's a battle for second that is just fantastic. After Carlos kind of takes the lead, and it is epic, and it produces Crofty's famous.
Through goes Hamilton!
And even if you don't like Lewis, it's Lewis and it's Charles and it's Checo, and Fernando puts his nose up in there, and it is wheel to wheel for many laps to determine second, third, fourth, and fifth. And it was epic last year. If we have at all a rerun of it, I will be the happiest man in the world, even a partial rerun.
I mean, Silverstone usually delivers, and we also have to be massively thankful to safety standards in F1, because last year's we could have been talking about something way worse. We had the horrible crash with a number of cars came together, which launched Joe and flipped his car upside down. He went right across the gravel and into the catch fence, and there was that horrible, what felt like an hour, that was probably about 7 minutes of what the hell's going on here. Thankfully, he was fine, but that was one heck of a shunt. But it meant then that with that being fine, we could look forward to a fantastic race, and we can look back at that weekend now with fond memories as opposed of anything that could have been worse. So it usually delivers an absolute cracker. I've probably cursed it, and it's going to be an absolute stink the house out now. The other thing we had is that why Max wasn't in the mix last year is because some AlphaTauri Nick De Vries got under his car, and it was only a small piece, and it kind of led to us having a discussion about how susceptible or how important the floor aero is, because a small piece of AlphaTauri got lodged under his floor, and he was just losing pace and went backwards. I mean, he managed to hold on to wherever it was, 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere around there maybe.
Yeah.
But he didn't have the pace, so that's kind of where we didn't see Max up at the front. So,
which reminds you how good the car is this year. In Canada, he drove the race with a bird in his brake duct, didn't slow him down.
Yeah.
The other thing about Silverstone is you don't have to be first to win. I like that. It gives you usually pretty good racing. A couple other last-minute jingles or stats here. All right, preview for the British Grand Prix. So we've had 21 people win from first, 17 people win from second. So again, I'm already a big fan of these stats. 8 people win from third, 5 people win from fourth, and 3 winners from fifth. There have been a couple who have won from sixth and seventh, a few, if you tallied up. But basically, you have a shot if you're in the top 5 on the starting grid, which is not the case at a lot of tracks. So I like that. I like that opportunity. We've had 3 times, and here's one I'd like to add to a Vale's Tales as well. 3 times a Climax engine has won here. I don't know what a Climax engine is. I could make a guess, but we've already drained that bucket of inappropriate conversation this episode. But I maybe we should research what a Climax engine is, because they've won 3 races. And of the active drivers, we've had Lewis lead with 13 podiums, Fernando with 6, Valtteri with 5, Max with 3, Charles with 3, and Carlos and Checo with 1 each. And interestingly, I think Charles' 3 podiums could be a precursor of a good race for Ferrari next week, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. If everyone can bring upgrades, do I think that we will not see... is that a double negative? Let me rephrase that. Do I think we'll see Max drive off into the distance and win this one? Yeah, probably. Do I think we could have an absolute stupendous battle for the rest of the podium? One hell, yes. I mean, I think if McLaren carry on improving, Mercedes bring the upgrades, Aston keep going, and Ferrari keep today's pace into next week, which they tend to do pretty well at Silverstone, we could have an amazing one. And if maybe the stars align, someone can take it to Max, and we can have a race up front as well. But he's like I said earlier on, I think just hats off. I put on Twitter earlier on, I'm now all aboard the Max domination train, as in I've let go of this year for the World Drivers' Championship. It's over. Put Max's ribbon on it. Do it now. So actually, I'd rather witness history and just see how far he can take this. How many wins can he get in a season? How quickly can he wrap it up? How many hat tricks or grand slams or whatever we want to call them? Like, just how great a season can he make this? I'm just like, just do it, Max, because who put it might have been the stat man Sean Kelly might have put a tweet out. I could be attributing this wrong, but basically said the childish, hot-headed driver that we used to see in Max Verstappen that was in the best car couldn't always take advantage of that best car, but now he's a facsimile of Michael Schumacher, because he's just nailing it time after time after time with precision, consistency, works well on the tires, just does not make a mistake. And when you do not make a mistake in the fastest car of the grid, it is something to behold. I got to be honest, it really is. So
yeah, agreed. Who do you have on the podium next week? Way too early, uninformed predictions and not knowing what the upgrades. What you got for, or should we say, what's the post Max podium? Do you just have Max first?
No, yeah. I mean, you don't have to agree with me. I'll go first this week, then, and I'll say Max wins it, and I'm going to go far too sentimental and say that the Mercedes bring the upgrades and they work and they always work well around here, and the British crowd cheer them on, and we get Lewis and George second.
I was going to say 2 Brits in a Mercedes.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, it's the 4th of July here in America this week, and you got to go get all British on us again.
Yeah.
On America's leading Formula One podcast. I got Max. Max, super Max, driving off. But I'm not going for another Grand Slam prediction. I got one right, I got one wrong. That's enough. I'm going to give Charles Chuck Leclerc. I'm putting him on the second step again. And my third step on the podium, my brain is telling me go Checo. My heart's telling me go Lewis. I'm going to join you. I'll put a Brit in a Mercedes on there. I'll put Lewis on the third step of the podium.
Okay, well, we don't have long to find out if we're right, because we're back to back. We're straight back into race week. So let's go, and you'll see our new little race week poster as we've been putting these out. So make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram. On Instagram, and on Twitter, you'll see our race week poster that we put out each week with the little stats of the track and all that kind of thing. So please follow, like, and share. Let's get the Dirty Side account. We've got a little bit of a... We've been catching up with, we mentioned him a couple of times, John Ritchie from the F1 podcast, Canadians, Canada's #1 podcast. They're chasing down 500 followers, I think, on Instagram, or maybe even more than that. And we got to catch them up. I don't want us to be beaten by them. So come on, guys, you can do it. I know people look at our channels and they like things, but let's get the following and the sharing and going. Join us up on the Discord. We've got a nice little community there. We've got a cracking little question of the day that's being run at the moment by the guys on there. So come on in and test your F1 knowledge. See if you can beat me and Sap, which won't take a lot in Brian's case.
I'd like to just say thank you, JP, for defending my honor that I only get a couple in a week. You're making it sound like I get them all wrong, but regardless, definitely. And check us out. Listen on the pod, wherever you may listen on your platforms. We'd appreciate reviews, or at least 5 stars. It helps us get into the algorithms. And Rob, are you watching next week at the Iron Horse again?
I think I will be. I'll be back down there again. See if we can try and get some more folk down there. So I know Vincenzo, friend of the show, kind of posted it on his Instagram story as well. Kind of, I think he put a call to arms of Central Connecticut Unite. Let's get some folk down there. We know there's F1 fans out there, so come along and watch the race with us. It'll be great fun, and I'm really looking forward to next week.
I am as well. Everybody, thank you so much for listening this week. We enjoyed the Austrian Grand Prix and talking about it with you, and we look forward to next week's review of the British GP.